Still got some of that cough?
Yeah, he told me at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
If not more, just I'm negative with everything else.
Sure. Oh, I believe you.
Yeah, she said the cough is just as bad as it was. You can add days.
Yeah.
I haven't even had her just showing when I have a cough.
Yeah.
So now my mom's got a cold, so and a sore throat. So I told her today, I said, I'll take you to urgent care. I said, no, it's just a cold. Okay, I'm not gonna think about it. That's all she's done what to do the last week and a half.
Yeah. Well, hope she does all right. Logan's hanging on with the cough and his cold, so he's staying home tonight. So I think we are officially time to start. The clock in the back is 1 minute slow. I know we had some people that were not here, and so we are on the lesson called Strangers and Pilgrims. This would be lesson 10. Page 61 is the particular page we are on. And we're going to have a small class today. So if you're someone who likes to make a comment, make 3. It's fine. You're not hogging the time, but I think comments make the class go better. This is something that actually Randy had sent me 2 sermons to listen to this past week, which were on exactly the same subject, or pretty close to it. Just the idea of living differently than the world. And one of the points from that lesson was that if we expect we can live exactly like everybody else and then still go to heaven, we kind of miss the whole point of heaven. You realize that becoming a Christian is picking up a cross and following Jesus. There is going to be something that gives in our life, something that changes about who we are, how we act, what we entertain ourselves with, how we spend our time. And so the more you understand that you want to be like Christ, the more you realize that's at odds with what the world has to offer. And it's not that we can't enjoy time in the world with people of the world, but that the most important thing is our heavenly citizenship and not our earthly one. And people get kind of caught up in that earthly identity, the earthly life, and they forget about what comes next. So we talked about a few different people last week, but there's a whole lot of pilgrims in the Bible, right? People that were asked to pack up and move, starting really with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, wanderers, even though they lived in the promised land, they weren't owners in the promised land. Finally, their relatives get back there 400 years later with Moses, but still, they were reminded constantly that they were travelers and strangers. And even Christians today, we are not quite at home, right? We live in the world, but we're not of the world. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to live like a stranger and a pilgrim. The first aspect up here, and I don't understand why he numbered it the way he did exactly, but faith should be a number, I think. But it's not. But faith is the very first one. So it takes faith to live like a stranger or a pilgrim. The passage he gives here, 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 7, says, "For we walk by faith and not by sight." And that comes in the passage where he's been talking about how the outward man, the outward body is suffering, decaying, things like that are hurting on the outside, but the inward man can be renewed day by day. And we understand that. It's almost like this life is our tenting and leaving, heading towards the promised land. And we understand this tent here is a temporary dwelling, and someday I'll have a more permanent dwelling in heaven. So this analogy is being made in Corinthians. But if you want to turn your Bibles to Hebrews 11, we're going to spend a little bit of time here. And I just want to focus on how Hebrews 11 starts. By the way, does anybody have the New King James? They read it? Okay, I'll ask you a question in a second. Because I have the New American Standard, and this is one of those occasions where I think it could be good to have 2 different versions, just the way it is translated. Both are accurate, but I think they have a little bit different nuance. But just starting in Hebrews chapter 11, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. What does yours say in the New King James?
Substance and
Evidence. Good. the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And I like that one too, probably even better than my own translation here, even though I generally prefer this. The idea that there is faith is not just a blind faith where I believe in nothing. I just believe in some empty idea or some feeling. There is a substance. My faith subsists of something. It consists of something. And looking at that concept, this is not a blind faith. Everybody in Hebrews 11 believe in something, and they have some reason to believe. But it's pointed out in the next part of it, if we have faith, mine says it's the conviction, yours says the evidence of things not seen. So it is a belief in something real, but also a belief in something that I can't see right now. And one of the easy examples that was given in the Bible by Jesus, when he's talking about a spiritual birth and Nicodemus can't understand it, he talks about the wind, right? So you can see the effects of the wind, but you can't see wind. And faith is kind of that way. Like, I have good reason to believe it's there. There are effects of it and things that I can count on, but it's also not something I can see. Going through some of these, you mentioned, we'll just start like with Noah. Noah had never seen rain before, and yet he had faith that it would rain when God said it would, and so he built the ark, right? You get people like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they've never seen the promised land. Abraham hasn't. And yet God says, pack up and go to a land I'll show you. Isaac and Jacob, they never saw a permanent dwelling, and they never saw their people become a great nation. And yet they believed it would happen. And so they followed God's commands. Moses, he saw what was in Egypt and the riches, but he preferred to trust in something else, right? Something that was even greater, right? And they're looking for a true dwelling place, a true home. And Hebrews 11 points out here, look at verse 6, without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of those who seek him. So according to that passage, verse 6, what is true saving faith in God? There's two components to it.
Well, you got to have the faith so you can be with him.
Okay, so the faith that he's going to do what he says he does, right? He's a rewarder. And then the first part of it is what? Don't overthink it. He is, right? There is a God, and there is a God who cares and rewards. And this is the kind of faith that everybody in here did. Abel had it when he offered the proper sacrifice. Noah had it. Enoch had it. That's why he walked with God. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses. Now Sarah's mentioned here. David, Gideon. There's some things that they can't see with their eyes, but they believe there is a God, and there is a God who pays attention, and he's going to reward. And so this is not just a blind faith. It's not just that, oh, I wish, hey God, if there's a God, save me if you can. I've heard in a movie a prayer like that one time. And they're like, I don't know if there's a God or not, but hey God, if there is a God, this is the time you can step in and do something for me. And that's not what we're talking about. What are some reasons that Abraham had that he could trust in God?
Yeah, basically he's going to offer Isaac that there would be something other than Isaac being sacrificed.
Yeah.
That God would provide something for him that he wouldn't have to sacrifice his son.
Yeah, look at how many times God has taken care of Abraham. And so Abraham knew, well, if God said, Isaac's the child that my nation will come through, then if I sacrifice him, hey, he'll take care of that problem somehow. Did Abraham know how it was going to happen? He didn't see that ram till later. Somebody who trusted God based on previous good things that God had done, but not on exact knowledge of the future. God's not going to give you an appearance and say, here's exactly how your life plan is going to pull out.
I mean, he didn't know whether he was going to get the ram or not.
Yeah, but he did it anyway. Before he had complete knowledge, in his heart, he already had assurance that it was as good as done. right? And so this is the kind of faith we're talking about. And these people are human. If you read every single one of them, a whole lot of them have flaws in their life. They're not perfect. So we're not talking about a perfect person. But the idea that I believe there is a God, and he sees and he will reward those who obey him and serve him. But it takes faith to walk God's way. If God says, don't spend your time around those kind of people doing that kind of stuff, and the rest of the world says it's no big deal, keep doing it, and you say, no, I can't because I'm living differently. Well, it takes some faith to trust. I don't see final judgment right now, but I'm going to trust that God's way is the best. I trust that his ways of parenting or having a marriage or working for my employer or being a citizen of a kingdom or a country, I got to trust that his way of doing things is the right way, even though I may not be surrounded by people doing it the same way that God commands. I may be the only one doing it my way. But if it's God's way, that's what matters, right? It takes faith. And diligently seeking him. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you talked about Abraham, how he trusted God when he had Isaac. Well, he also had trusted God when he told him, I have no heir.
Yeah.
And God says, you will have an heir. So he had to trust him in that one, too.
Yeah. He and Sarah both were well beyond childbearing years, and he had to trust it. And actually, Romans tells us that it's almost a form of believing in resurrection. Because bodies that were as good as dead, he believed life could come from them.
Yeah.
God could do that.
Genesis 15, he says, the Lord said, and behold, the Lord came saying, this one shall not be your heir, but, on. Finally said, okay, you will have a child.
It's not Ishmael, it's Isaac, right?
Right, and it's, Sarah was up in her 80s, 90s, or something like that, and, nowadays, women don't think about having children at that age. Sometimes 60s, yes, but Sarah's age,
Yeah, world record in modern days is 67 with great medical intervention and very dangerous high risk is world record now. So it was an Indian couple that believed that it was bad luck to only have girls. So he's like, I'll keep trying for a boy. So they paid great expense, and it was twin, boy and girl. So.
One of the greatest examples of faith probably that we read about in the Bible, Abraham getting ready to sacrifice Isaac. So now he was ready not to kill him, but he knew God would provide the sacrifice. And I think he knew he would not have to kill him.
Yeah. Abraham mentioned here a bunch of times. He is father of our faith for a reason, absolutely. Notice, if they knew they were going to a promised land, they could have come back, right? Verse 8 of Hebrews 11, by faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, going out to a place he was to receive for an inheritance. He went out not knowing where he was going. By faith he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. He was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Verse 13, and skip down. All these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and welcomed them from a distance, having confessed that they were strangers and exiles. For those that say such things make it clear they are seeking a country of their own. If indeed they'd been thinking of that country they went out, they would have an opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God's not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. I love that idea. They could have gone back at any time. If they thought that's where God's plan was, they could have done it. Or if they gave up on his plan. But instead, they would rather follow a promise that they were told will not be fully fulfilled until 400 years after you. And you'll never see it, but it's true. And so the kind of faith it takes to do the right thing for your grandchildren, even knowing you'll never see the final results of it. I mean, this is a faith that is a legacy left behind because they made the confession, I don't belong here. That's what the text says. And sometimes we want so badly to fit in that we're trying to fit in with the wrong people. And believe me, God put in us a desire to fit in. It's a natural, normal desire, and it's one that needs to be fulfilled. But you can't fulfill that desire with the wrong people and the wrong ways of thinking. It's not going to be people of this world where we're going to fit in best. And if it is, we might have a priority problem. It's got to be the people we have the most important things in common with. And I'll be honest, some Christians, if it wasn't for our faith in Christ, I don't know if I'd ever really get that close to them. I mean, I'd be cordial to them, whatever, I'm not going to be mean, but we just don't have a ton of things in common. But we have the most important thing in common, and my life is enriched because I've gotten to know these people who share the same faith that I do. And they realize this life, it doesn't matter all that much, right? In the grand scheme of things, this life is just, we're strangers. We're passing through to what comes next. And by the way, that's how I get through scary news stories. And by the way, every generation has them. So, everybody's living through wars. Everybody's living through diseases and pandemics and famines. And there's always been something bad. Always. And how do you get through it? You don't just wait until the world's perfectly at peace. Because that'll never happen. You don't just wait until nobody's sick anymore. Because that's not going to happen. You realize this is not my permanent dwelling. And this is not where I'm finding final rest and satisfaction. That I'm looking for something else, right?
Then at the last part of 16, where it says he had prepared a city for them. I think he's talking about heaven, or he's talking about literal Jerusalem.
Yeah, and I think that is the idea. Especially the next chapter talks about that. Like heavenly Jerusalem kind of an idea. Yeah. So even David, when he finally founded Jerusalem, it wasn't actual Jerusalem that was the ideal. He was even still looking for dwelling with God in his courts forever, in the Psalms and things like that. Good observation.
I think there in verse 30 where they're talking about the walls of Jericho. They didn't know when they marched around 7 times if them walls were going to fall or if they were going to stay up, or they had to have some kind of faith that something would happen that would destroy the enemies or whatever, and knock that wall down.
Yeah, God didn't say what was going to happen. He didn't give them all the details of the battle plan. He just, go do this thing in this way, this many times when I tell you to.
Sometimes it's like, well, why walk 7 times around?
Yeah.
What's going to happen after that? They had no clue what was going to go on.
And we don't read about them questioning it, right? They just follow. My kids are at the age, my older ones, where they do want to know a lot of why. And that's good. I mean, and I do spend quite a bit of time trying to explain to them, here's why we don't say those words. Here's why we pick up our room. Here's why we do our homework before other things. I try to explain the whys to my kids. But there is a point at which you need to trust the one in authority and learn to trust. And sometimes not even knowing all the hows and whys, you're still going to have to obey. Now that's mighty hard because the authorities in our life have let us down, haven't they? There's been some bosses in our life, some teachers in our life, some government officials in our life that aren't real trustworthy. And they tell you, trust me, and then they're not real trustworthy, like I said. But God is not going to let you go. That's why he says, number 1 here at this point, trusting in God's promises. Abraham and Sarah, they might have laughed at first because, wow, that does sound crazy. 100-year-olds, 90-year-olds, they don't have kids. It's just not how it works. But God's going to make it happen. And all the different aspects of their life where God credited it to them as righteousness. There are times it's going to be harder than others to trust in God's promises. But it's necessary. We have to believe. Think back to all the things he's promised, all the things he said would happen that did happen. We've got to learn. He's going to do that same for me. And he's done it for me before. He'll do it again. Joanne?
Reading that every day now, and he's always pleading with God to watch out for him because the enemy comes showing, and I think he believed God would.
Yeah. And I think David probably had more years of conflict than he did years of peace, if you really add it all up. It seemed like pretty much most of his life was that way. But he never doubted God, right? He always trusted him, and he'd make a way. Sometimes he'd beg from the bottom of his heart with tears coming out. take care of my enemy, take care of the person who betrayed me. But he trusted that God would handle it. That's one reason why the Psalms are so good, by the way, because they teach us it's okay to have real feelings, to express uncertainties and doubt, but still trust God. I don't think God wants you to fake that you understand everything and everything's great and you just, spin everything positive in everyday life. Because I heard someone say one time that a Christian never has a bad day in their life. I'm like, who are you talking about? Like, that's not true, right? Christians have a lot of bad days. Our master had a lot of bad days, including one really bad day where he died on the cross. So Christians have some bad days. And I can express that to God in my prayers and my songs, but still not lose faith in him, right? And so I think you're great to bring up David and the Psalms. That's a great place to look. You can still trust his promise, even if you don't know the how and the why. Go ahead.
Another good section would be Peter being in prison. Okay, he could have gave up on God because he's thrown in jail. He said no. Instead of giving up, he taught people, and he had the faith in God. Says, "I will be let go one day."
Yeah.
And he had the faith that God would release him. When God did release him, but it took faith to be in jail, chained up, beaten.
Yeah.
Pretty
much all the apostles ended up going through that one time or another, right? And they got back out and they did it again.
Yeah.
They prayed.
One stuck in my brain most.
Yeah.
He suffered the most, I think.
Yeah. Between Peter and Paul, they were target number one for the Roman Empire, right? But they got out of jail and they kept preaching. He said, "You don't teach again in his name anymore." I can't help do that, Peter said we got to serve God rather than men. So trusting in God's promises. And trust is an active thing. It's not just like a belief in my heart, but trust acts, trust behaves. And living my life like his way is the best way, even if I don't quite understand. So I think that's really important. Abraham, when he trusted, he went out and went from his home in Ur and went somewhere he'd never been before, right? Trust is action. Joanne?
Trust and give you a lot of peace too, because if you're trusting in God and you've got a problem, you pray to him, and you believe he'll answer it. That gives you peace.
Yeah.
And peace is wonderful.
Yeah. It's a way of handing the things over that I recognize I'm not in control of and putting it in God's court, right? God, I know you can take care of this. You're bigger than me. And I'm just going to give it over to you and just trust what comes next, And I think you're right. That peace comes from, not from being strong enough and big enough to handle the problems ourselves, but trusting in the one who is strong enough to care for it. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's, you can talk about Abraham, that's what he did. When God told him to go up to the mountain and do a sacrifice, and sacrifices on the son, I don't know if y'all talked about it right up a little late. Isaac said, well, hey, we're going to use you. And Abraham said to God, I want to provide. Don't worry about it. And the faith is no. One half.
Yeah.
Trust it.
Yeah. And sometimes when we talk about any of these people, these great people of faith, we try to guess what was going on in their head, and did they think, oh no, how's this going to... Honestly, there's no indication that Abraham questioned. And I'm not saying he wasn't internally conflicted in some way or that it wasn't a hard decision for him. But what we read about is that he got up and did it. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for me. I know God says be a light to the world. God says teach my neighbor. God says to tell people they're in sin when they're in sin. These hard conversations. And I sit here and try to figure out, well, is there a right way to do it, a right time, a perfect time? Maybe I'm not the person for it, or can I wait till the better time? No, some of these characters in the Bible, when they trusted God, they got up and they did it. They were human. They had fears. They had anxieties. So being a Christian is not about getting rid of fear and anxiety. Being a Christian is about trusting God and doing things anyway that are hard, knowing he's got our back.
Just like you talk about trust, children trust their parents to do the right thing for them. And that's what I think, you know, as a Christians, we're God's children, you should trust him no matter what you do.
Yeah. Especially young children. Mom and dad will take care of it. It's just expected. They just believe it's going to happen.
You know, they have the trust to say, okay, mom and dad's going to take care of me. I don't have to worry about this or do anything, or don't have to worry about when I can eat because I know the food's going to be there. And that's where we should put our trust in God, because we know that we may want something. Well, you can't have it. You know, like kids say, I want candy. No, you can't have it now until after dinner. You know, wait, but we'll put our trust in him and he will deliver to us no matter what.
Yeah, have faith like a child. That's exactly right. And I'm already kind of transitioning into point 2. So if you still have something on point 1, that's fine. But point 2 on this page, obeying God's instructions. It says, by faith, Abraham obeyed God. Going back to that verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, going to a place he was to receive for an inheritance. He went out, not knowing where he was going. God says, go tell the whole world the gospel. Do I know how it's going to turn out? Do I know every conversation I have is going to pan out and work? No. God says install elders in every church. Okay. It was a new process for us. It was a little bit scary, to be honest. There's a lot of unknowns with it, uncertain things. At the end of the day, we had to do it. You know, if we had men that were qualified, we had to go about it and do it. Hard commands by God, we don't exactly know how they're going to turn out. And, for example, when it comes to elders, I've heard churches that have not had elders for years. And they're like, well, what if the elders start sinning? How do we get them out? And that was one of their reasons for not wanting to start the process of appointing them. Like, you can't just think about the assumption everything's going to go wrong. Or they're thinking about hiring a preacher. Well, what if he starts going off the deep end and preaching this stuff over here? So you're saying you're going to not take a right action for fear of what might happen at some other point. I'm not saying you got to be dumb about it. You got to have some wisdom. But I think sometimes, in the names of being careful, we can end up paralyzing ourselves from just getting up and doing it. We just got to obey sometimes. Whether we like it or not, we got to act. So in each and every situation, there are complexities, there's things to talk about. But James, chapter 2 says the same thing here, but faith is known by its works, right? You can't say you have faith, but then do nothing about it. The demons have that kind of faith. The demons believe in God. In fact, they have better knowledge of God than probably most people on earth. But what kind of good does the faith of demons do? Yeah. They quaked and quivered every time Jesus showed up. They knew who he was and what his power was. They weren't having a saving faith, right? So just a mere belief in our brain is not faith that God's calling for, right? It is a trust and obey. That's the kind of obedience that we're looking for. Other thoughts on this? Maverick?
Every example that you called out there is a faith followed by action. Yeah. And every single one requires an action to follow it. I think you can apply that same kind of generalized judgment with that. That our faith requires an action on our part. It requires us to do something to show that commitment, to show that that's what we want to do, who we want to do, what we want to do. It required action on all their parts as well.
And that's the pattern. Universal pattern, everywhere. Someone believes God, they do something about it, right? Something's got to change. I think, repentance and baptism fit perfectly into that pattern. And all throughout Hebrews 11, think about some of the stuff that they did. You know, he even mentions at the end of it, some people got sawn in two for their faith, or thrown to lions, or all this kind of stuff. Like, Christians and believers throughout history have done some really hard things. They acted on it. So, point 3, I think, is important too. And this is, you have to trust God, you have to obey God, but to be a pilgrim, to recognize I'm a pilgrim and a stranger, also means I've got to come out of the world. And I'm going to be different in some way. I'm going to look different, talk different, entertain myself differently, spend my time differently. I'll have a different set of friends, and the way we have fun will be a little bit different than the world. You know, there's going to be something about my life that does not blend in with the world. And it's not to say there aren't good people out there that I can have good fun with, and they're doing good things in their own way. But at some point, I have to say my friendship is with God and His people rather than the world. Actually, if you want to turn to 1 Peter, he mentions a passage here. And I actually want to go to another one in 1 Peter after this one. But we'll start with 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 15. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves, also in all your behavior, because it's written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. If you address as Father the one who impartially judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves in fear during the time on your stay on earth, knowing you were not redeemed with perishable things like silver or gold from your futile way of life, inherited from your forefathers, but with precious blood as of a lamb, unblemished and spotless, the blood of Christ. What does the word holy mean? What does it mean to be holy? What does it mean to be holy? Eric? Yeah. Set apart or different, right? Somehow there's something about our lives that is separate, is different. The Levite tribe in the Old Testament, they had special things that they were allowed, or only them were allowed to do, and certain things they were not allowed to do. And it made them distinct from every other tribe, all the other tribes, right? So us being holy, he says, you've been cleansed with holy blood. You're following the pattern of a holy God. Come apart and be different, right? Now, Peter makes it practical. The whole book is practical about here's how your life's different. Here's the things you change. You used to be, all these different things, but now you are a Christian. But look at the beginning of chapter 4, 1 Peter chapter 4. Therefore, since Christ has suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same purpose, because he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, so as to live for the rest of the time in the flesh, no longer for the lusts of men, but the will of God. For the time already past is sufficient for you who have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, abominable idolatries. In all this they are surprised you do not run with them into the same excesses of dissipation. They malign you, but they will give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For the gospel has for this purpose been preached even to those who were dead, that though they are judged in the flesh as men, they may live in the Spirit according to the will of God. He says this is the very reason that the gospel of Christ was preached. It's to separate you, to change you, and to save you, right? So that you're not going to be judged in the same way that the world is, those living by the world. Notice some of the things he says you're going to give up as a Christian. Some of the drinking and the partying, lust. He mentions idolatries. And you might think about the modern American idolatry is greed and covetousness, just like the Colossians were accused of idolatry because they worship money and wealth and things like that. He mentions sensuality. And sometimes that does have to do with things of a sexual nature, but sensuality is bigger than that. It's living for the senses. What feels good, what I can experience, what I enjoy, what brings me pleasure. That can be food and drink, that can be alcohol and drugs, that can be entertainment. But sensuality, living for the feeling. So drugs and alcohol, living for the feeling, greed and idolatry. He says the world does not understand. And they'll say, you used to do this with me. Why don't you do it now? And they don't get that the purpose of life is to get away from that and to live a holy and different life. And he says they may malign you. They might speak bad about you or judge you, even though you've just chosen to separate yourself from some of these behaviors. The point is, it goes back to the beginning, if you really are a stranger in this world, it's not that I get to keep everything else that everyone else does and still go to heaven. Somewhere, there's going to be some no's you say, and some sacrifices you make, and some lies you just don't promise. And you're not going to live just like the world. And I'm not here to draw every exact line for you, but I will say if your life is just the same as everybody else's, it's time to examine what's going on, right? There's got to be some difference. If someone looks at you, do they even know you're a Christian? And not by your bumper sticker or a cross necklace. I'm not saying those are sinful, but that's not how we identify as a Christian, right? It's our changed life. That's how people know who we are and who we belong to. So there is a coming out of the world that's necessary. That is repentance and baptism, that moment when you change your life. You put to death the old person and you start living like a new person. There are many other good passages in here. We might look at a few of them. But do you guys have other thoughts on this point?
When I first started working, I worked in a fast food joint, and the girls would go out after work and drink. They would always say, "Go out and drink with me." I was just a Christian. I said, "No, I'm not going to go out with you." So eventually, they all learned that they weren't even going to bother to ask me to go because they knew. As one girl said to the boss, "Are you going to ask me?" She said, "Nah, she goes to church. She don't want to drink with us." So they all finally realized that I wasn't going to go do the same thing that they did.
Yeah. And you don't have to be pushy about it, but people will notice eventually if your behavior is different than theirs. And they're going to have questions sometimes, right? They're not going to get it. Other thoughts?
Jerry, I was just thinking that, you said people are going to judge you. I'm not worried about what people are going to judge me of what I do or how I do it. The only one I got to worry about judging is the Lord himself. If they want to say bad things to me, okay, go ahead and say it. Don't bother me none. You just showed me that you don't understand my ways. I'm trying to pull away from parties and, all the sinful things. Well, we'll judge you on that because you don't do anything. Well, go ahead and judge me then. That's what you feel. Yeah. But my judgment always comes from the Lord no matter what.
Yeah. Ultimately, that is the godly perspective on it. I'll say for new Christians, it's hard. And not just new Christians. I think, like I said earlier in the lesson, we want to fit in. We really do. And we don't like it. We feel the otherness, the difference from the world. And it's going to take maturity to get to the point where we'll just, okay, believe what you want about me, say what you want about me. But I'll say there's a lot of people that need to learn that example. And it's hard. It's hard to stand out and be different. Maverick?
It's something I probably think about too much. This whole idea of making sure that I'm not too much like those around me, and maybe not too much, but it is something I consider quite often. Am I differentiating myself enough in the way I act, the way I respond to things, what I laugh at? That's maybe sometimes the hardest thing, especially in a work environment. And I've had experiences on both ends of the spectrum where I'll mention to somebody about church, and I get to, you go to church, like, what am I, and then that's like a night, it's like, what am I not doing? But then sometimes you get the opposite of that, where a couple weeks ago, I was doing stuff for Dad, doing sprinklers, and getting ready for winter. And I was talking to a customer for a little while, and just chatting like I always do, nothing different. And he just started looking at me funny, so eventually he asked, he's like, you go to church anywhere? And I was like, well, yeah, he's like, I could tell. Like, he just, the way you talk, the way you handle, like, I can just tell that, that you have faith. And so that was obviously, that's the opposite end of the spectrum where you go, okay, I feel good, like I'm doing the right thing, where I'm being noticed, not for bad stuff, but for good things. And so, I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like Maverick, we talk on the internet, we call it TeamSpeak. There's a bunch of guys here, and everybody else says something that I don't like, and, say a cuss word or anything. Oh, Mac, I'm sorry. I know you go to church, but I'm sorry for saying that. And, well, please don't say it again, But they know that I go to church, and they know I don't like that kind of language. So they try to refrain from doing it for me, which makes me feel good. It changes in. Mac, I haven't cussed a while out here with you on here, and I said, that's up to you, but I don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Maverick brings up a good point, and you can get both sides of it, right? The reactions that are good, people notice, maybe react in some kind of positive way, and maybe they know they can go to you and just say, hey, pray for me, this thing is going on in my life. They know they can go to you. Then you get the other ones that are like, maybe they do it on purpose to antagonize you, or they purposely try to share the dirty joke in front of you, or, but people notice is the point of this. And if you came out of the world, and some of the people you meet through your old way of life come across you, that's what this passage is all about. It says, they're going to say, you used to do this. Why don't you do it anymore? And they won't get it. That the changed life, I firmly believe, is one of the first ways that people get interest in the gospel. And it's before they'll even come to a church service or anything like that, or a Bible study, they're going to notice something different. Eric?
But when people, I guess I've started to use it, like they say, you used to do this, why don't you now? It's because I've grown with God. If I still do that, I'm a hypocrite. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. It's a way to turn it back. Because I was thinking too, I used to try to make sure people knew I went to church, but maybe I need to make sure people know I'll help them find God. And I'll help them get there. Because I started thinking about that too, like last week, that actor Matthew Perry died. And he had an interview a couple years ago, and he said, when I die, not knowing he's going to die in 2 years, he said, people will talk about my TV show, and that's fine. But I want them to realize, I want them to remember me as somebody that helped them get through the problems I had. Because he'd started doing that. Because he had problems with drugs his whole life. He basically said, look, I'll help you do this. You might see me fail at it, but you know I'll help you do this. And I kind of wanted to do that with me as not so much I go to church, but I will help you get to heaven as best I can. You might see me fail at times, but know that I'm still going to try to help you all the time.
Yeah. So being a Christian is not about putting on the perfect image, and in fact, that might actually be countering what we're trying to accomplish.
That's where I think we're commanded to confess our sins so that people know we're not perfect.
Yeah, I think the honest approach that I'm heading in a certain direction. I'm trying my best, and sure, I did do that stuff with you, but here's where I'm at now. And the changed life is such a powerful influence. It really is. And think about some of the folks in different churches in the first century. They would have bowed down to all the idols that everyone else did in town. They would have worshipped the gods and some of the drunken orgy kind of things that they did to celebrate their gods. They would have done some things that fit in with the rest of the culture, but was completely against God's word. And now they're not doing it anymore. People have questions. And that changed life, the consistent changed life, working towards a direction. I'm trying to escape the judgments that the rest of the world is going to get, and hopefully bring some people with me by my influence. Got to come out of the world. Dwayne?
And one approach too, people might be like in this passage in First Peter, chapter 1, verse 9, which says that you're a chosen generation, and that you are his special people, that you may proclaim his praises of him who brought you out of that.
Yeah.
So we started off with praising God, you know what all God has done for all of us.
Yes.
And that's a better approach in some ways than to start saying what the differences are and what they do, what they do.
Yeah. Say good things about God. We make evangelism so hard sometimes. And it doesn't have to be that, right? Just speaking about how good God is. And that kind of language, that's powerful, right? And they see us, a changed person, talking about the goodness of God. We're going to be a light to the world, right? Go ahead.
Like the last few years, I guess one of the most powerful things I heard was kind of evangelizing. The guy at work said, if he finds money, he gives it back. And they're like, why did you do that? My soul worked for that money. That's all he said, is that affected me. I'm like, that affected me. I could go to church all my life, but that's a great line. My soul worked more than that.
Yeah.
And that's all you got to say that makes people think.
So I'd encourage you guys to look at the rest of the passages here and the rest of the points he makes. He talks about some of the things that change when you become a Christian, when you come away from the world. And just the point that you can't have it both ways. I think so many in the world promise that you can have it all. It's the idea, come to God as you are, stay as you are, don't change a thing. And simply that is not the picture of the gospel. The gospel is as beautiful and amazing and simple as it is. We have messy lives that make it sometimes difficult and ugly and complicated to do the right thing. And so we can't just live like the world, act like the world's okay, and we can just do whatever we want and still please God. There's got to be a change. There's got to be some kind of a separation. And not in a judgy way, but in a way that we show people a better way to live. So thanks, everybody. This has been a good lesson for me, encouraging. We're going to kind of keep on the same idea of influence as we talk about salt and light in the next lesson. That'll be for Sunday, lesson 11. Don't throw your boat in here.
And then my lower back hurt. Was that door?
I guess set it up real quick.
You went Monday.
Our first song this evening will be Fairest Lord Jesus. Fairest Lord Jesus, ruler of all nature, all of God and man, the Son. Thee will I cherish, thee will I honor, thou my soul's glory, joy, and crown. Fair are the meadows, fair still the woodlands, robed in the blooming garb of spring. Jesus is fairer, Jesus is pure, who makes the woeful heart to sing. Fair is the sunshine, fairer still the moonlight, and all the twinkling starry host. Jesus shines brighter, Jesus shines purer than all the angels can boast.
Yesterday, a coworker of mine who I worked with for a few years, and he went on to another part of the mill, but we remained Facebook friends, and we would post on each other's and kind of tease each other and stuff, because I have 3 girls that are similar age to his 3 boys, and we just joke about that and stuff like that. But he posted there on the page yesterday, his page, if you wake up and everyone you care about is healthy, it's a great day. And I liked that, because it's true, because we get caught up in all this stupid stuff in life. And even, like, if you wake up and everybody you care about is healthy, it is a great day. Well, I found out this morning we were talking that when he posted that, I didn't realize it, he left work early yesterday because his wife had gotten in a bad car wreck. Broke both her hips and shattered her pelvis. So he was leaving to go see her, be with her, and all that. He made it to Route 49, and the guy who stole the car, going 100 miles an hour, hit him and killed him. Yesterday. That was that big accident that happened up on 12 and 49 yesterday. And I guess I kind of agreed to give the invitation on his hormone tonight because it was a gloomy day today at work. All of us that knew him. And but that also made me think of James 14, or 4:14. Come now, you say, today or tomorrow, we will go into such a place and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. So then I guess my invitation is, if you're not a Christian, don't hesitate. Don't be afraid. don't wait. My friend is gone. Like that. Going to do something good. He's going to go help his wife who had been in a bad accident. And his life is gone by a guy that made a stupid decision to steal a car and go 100 miles an hour to get away from the police and kill him. None of his decisions, all his good decisions ended from somebody else's bad decision. But if you're not right with Christ, you're lost. And it could happen like that, just like it did to him yesterday. So if you're not a Christian, don't be scared, don't be afraid, make things right. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen when we leave out of here. I guarantee he didn't think about getting hit by a guy by 100 miles an hour going to help his wife. If you are a Christian and you've fallen away and you need help, again, don't be afraid, don't be scared. Don't put pride in front of making yourself right with God. Because again, you don't know what's going to happen when we leave. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I guess that's my simple invitation. If you want to become a Christian, do it now. You don't know what's going to happen. If you're not right with God, we can help you tonight. Make it right. Do it now. Don't wait. You don't know what's going to happen. If you need to become a Christian tonight, or you need us to pray with you to make things right tonight, so that when you leave, you don't have to worry about what's going to happen, even if it's bad. You'll be right with God. You can come forward when we stay in this thing. Why keep Jesus waiting, waiting in the cold? He will bear you gently, gently to his fold. See him slow and open, high and low. Why keep Jesus waiting, waiting at the door? Haunting, knock it softly, softly o'er and o'er. Hear him soul and open, high and low. Why keep Jesus waiting, knocking at the door? Soon he'll cease his pleading, yes, forevermore. Come, poor soul, obey him, high and low. Sit.